Hafa buenas. This public hearing is now called to order, and the time now is 2 p.m. Monday, February 9th, 2026. The hearing is conducted by myself, Senator Telo, Taitague, Chairwoman on the Committee on Economic Investments, Military Buildup, Regional Relations, Technology, Regulatory Affairs, Justice, Election and Retirement. And to comply with the open government law, notices of this hearing was published on KUAM and the Government of Guam public notice portal on Monday, February 2nd, 2026, and the second notice on Saturday, February 7th, 2026. Notices of this hearing was also disseminated to all senators and media via email and is made available on the Guam Legislature's website. I'd like to thank those who are here today, Senator Shawn Gumataotao, the author of the legislation we're hearing today. Good afternoon, Senator. And I also like to welcome those who are here today and listening, whether on YouTube or on the TV channel. Welcome to your Guam legislature. Now, at this time, colleagues, Senator Gumataotao, of course, copies of the legislation and documents received ahead of this hearing can be accessed through the Google Drive link, which is published on the public hearing notices for this hearing and also emailed to you in advance. For the listening public, you can access the Google Drive link on the public hearing notices published on the Government of Guam public notice portal at notices.guam.gov or the Guam Legislature's website at guamlegislature.gov. If you need assistance, please feel free to call the legislature at 671-472-3465. So before we begin, I'd like to set some rules of engagement. Please, when you speak, make sure you speak directly into the microphone. And for the record, state your name, position, and who you represent. I ask that those who are testifying today to stay seated for any questions my colleagues have, and then you'll be excused. If you do need to leave a little bit early, just let me know in advance. I respectfully ask that you conduct ourselves professionally and please respect each other's opinion. Those individuals who do not comply will be asked to be removed and prohibited from further participation. And as I read this legislation, I would like to invite to the table right now to get prepared is Fred Berdallo, Danielle, Esther Agagi, of course, and Leo Diaz. If you can come to the table and get situated, and I'll continue on with explaining the agenda. So on the agenda today, we have Bill 191-38 COR introduced by Senator Shawn Gumataotao, and an act to add a new 70.460 to Article 4 of Chapter 70, Title 9, Guam Code Annotated, relative to prohibiting the unauthorized operation of unmanned aircraft over Government of Guam correctional and detentional facilities. The bill that was introduced received a fiscal note on October 10th, 2025. And the Bureau stated that a similar concern was addressed in the 34th Guam Legislature through Bill 155-38, introduced in July of 2017, which aimed to prohibit drones and unmanned robots with the airspace of 1,000 feet or certain government facilities, included penalties, but it did not receive a public hearing at that time. So I'm glad we had a chance now to address it, as technology is growing super fast. It's not going to be drones, it'll probably be something else later on, right, that we're going to have to address. So that being said, we also sent to legal counsel Bill 191-38 to be reviewed and during its introduction. So at this time, we've heard no recommendations or changes or amendments at this time. Invitations were sent to the following: the Judiciary of Guam, Office of the Attorney General, Guam Bar Association, Guam Homeland Security, Guam Police Department, and the Guam Department of Corrections. Okay, and at this time, I'd like to recognize the author of Bill 191-38 COR for his opening remarks. Senator Gumataotao, you are now recognized.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and excuse me. And thank you for scheduling this public hearing on Bill 191, which I introduced at the request of the Department of Corrections Director, and I appreciate the opportunity to begin our discussion on the bill with these opening remarks. Madam Chair, Bill 191 prohibits the unauthorized use of unmanned aircraft devices, commonly known as drones, over Department of Corrections property and detention facilities managed by the Guam Police Department, the Department of Youth Affairs, and the Judiciary of Guam. The measure proposes to implement a $500 penalty or 6-month imprisonment for first-time violators and stricter jail time for repeat offenders. Madam Chair, according to the Department of Corrections, the unauthorized use of unmanned aircraft devices threaten the security of correctional and detention facilities nationwide. The department argues that the enactment of legislation prohibiting unlawful use of unmanned aircraft is critical to the safety of DOC employees and the individuals who are entrusted to their care. The technology, if used without the permission of correctional and detention facility officials, has the potential to aid in the smuggling of dangerous contraband, including weapons and illegal drugs, to individuals confined within correctional and detention facilities locally and nationally. Madam Chair, while I recognize the importance of unmanned aircraft to the effective delivery of critical public safety services, particularly for law enforcement searches and during emergency rescue and disaster response operations, as we witnessed during a 2025 island-wide manhunt, which followed a very terrifying incident in my home village of Telo, it is important for policymakers to restrict the unauthorized use of this technology over DOC's adult detention facility and other detention facilities operated by the Guam Police Department and the Judiciary of Guam. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, the Federal Aviation Administration approved unmanned aircraft flight restrictions over Federal Bureau of Prisons facilities, including high-rise jails, medical referral centers, and medium security facilities that adjoin high security facilities. A total of 109 of the Bureau of Prisons' 122 federal facilities were covered by FAA policy as of March of 2020. As I shared following the introduction of Bill 191, this measure does not diminish the value that drones serve as a force multiplier for our public safety and law enforcement agencies. Rather, it ensures that this proven technology is not misused in a way that harms or compromises the sensitive work our hardworking women and men in law enforcement put forward every day to ensure the safety of all the citizens of Guam. Madam Chair, Bill 191 also builds on the efforts that started, as you mentioned in your open, several years ago during the 34th Guam Legislature, including the introduction of Bill 155, which proposed to prohibit drones in the airspace over certain government of Guam facilities, which the measure at the time described as vulnerable targeted areas. Vulnerable target areas include the Judiciary of Guam, Office of Civil Defense, Guam Homeland Security, Guam Police Department, and Department of Corrections. Bill 155 from the 34th Guam Legislature proposal was offered just weeks before DOC officers discovered an unmanned aircraft or drone near one of the prison's housing units while searching the prison's yard and perimeter. Now, I have heard from various law enforcement officers in our community over the last year doing work at the adult correctional facility that over the last year alone, they have witnessed these brazen acts, not once, not twice, multiple times. Madam Chair, Bill 191 acknowledges that in addition to the movement of contraband over the perimeter fence with no motion detection capability, continued shortage of officers, prison overcrowding, and the lack of privacy within interview areas, DOC, in their 2021 Facilities Master Plan, identified the movement of contraband onto DOC property through drones as a threat to the safety of employees and those under their watch. Madam Chair, this bill is straightforward. It is necessary, and it supports those who sacrifice so very much through their work across our law enforcement agencies to keep their and all of our families safe. With that, Madam Chair, I look forward to the presentations this afternoon, including amendments that may be needed to help with Bill 191 moving forward in our legislative process. Again, Suzus Masi, Madam Chair, for the time this afternoon.
You're very welcome, Senator Gumataotao. And at this time, I'd like to recognize Danielle from the judiciary to actually read her testimony. Also, we're going to, if you don't mind, Fred and Esther, because she has to leave, we're going to be asking her any questions, Mr. Chair. I'm always looking at Mr. Chair, Senator Gumataotao. So, Danielle, you may proceed, and then just stay there for some questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hafide, good afternoon. Danielle Rossetti, Administrator of the Courts for the Judiciary of Guam. Good afternoon, and Hafide, Madam Chair and Judiciary Oversight, Senator Telo Taitague. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on Bill number 191-38 COR, introduced by Senator Shawn Gumataotao, relative to prohibiting the unauthorized operation of unmanned aircraft over Government of Guam, correctional and detention facilities. We appreciate that the bill includes the judiciary's facilities, as we also provide security to members of the inmate and detainee populations. Extending these protections to judiciary-operated spaces strengthens overall facility security and preserves the safety of court operations. Individuals in custody are regularly present on court premises for hearings, arraignments, and other judicial proceedings. Unauthorized drone activity near court buildings poses risks such as attempts to deliver contraband and potential threats to judicial officers, staff, jurors, and the public. Because of the nature of the judiciary's work with inmates and detainees, we fully support the bill's intent to include all relevant judiciary facilities within its scope. With respect to the penalties established under the bill, the judiciary recognizes that determining the appropriate level of sanctions for unauthorized drone operations is a policy decision within the purview of the legislative body, and we would leave that to your discretion. The judiciary again thanks the committee for the opportunity to provide testimony and expresses its support for this important public safety measure. And with that, I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I just wanted to ask one question because, as the oversight looking into judiciary and what you can and cannot do, is something like this can be done through, resolution or rules and regs within your own, like I said again, jurisdiction at judiciary to provide that what you can and cannot do at the...
With respect to
on premises of
on premises, obviously, if any illegal action occurred on premises, we would follow the law enforcement protocol, contact the Guam Police Department. Our marshals security would provide the assistance necessary when it comes to law enforcement, and we go through the normal process of what would normally happen if there was an incident that occurred on our premises.
So let's say this is such, this is a good bill. I like this bill very much, but can the judiciary already have rules? Because, you're a third branch of government, sometimes even your procurement that I find out you do on your own, your procurement, but can you also create rules?
So the Supreme Court, through its rulemaking authority, can promulgate rules and regulations with respect to court rules and administration of justice, right? The Judicial Council as a body can also adopt policies and regulations with respect to personnel and administrative components. Anything, I think, a bill of such nature, I don't think that we could on our own decide to say, hey, we're going to take action if you decide to fly a drone over, right?
Okay.
We would look at the trespassing law and see if there was any trespassing violation, and then we would go that route, but not in the sense that the intent of this bill explains.
Now, do you have any trespassing laws currently, for individuals coming onto the property without...
I don't think anything specific to our branch, but I think there's in Title IX, I think Chapter 37, there's the trespassing statute.
A statute there. And are you familiar with the penalties for that or anything?
I've not looked at it recently,
Okay.
but yeah.
So I do have my staff looking into talking with your clerk, the law library right now to try and find out what those penalties are. So then this legislation would be needed in order for you to be able to enforce something like this, even though you do have some trespassing laws already in the books. I'm thinking maybe this is on ground versus in air. That's the biggest difference to move forward. And
Yeah, and specifically because of the
Right.
advancement of technology, right?
Right.
It would mean that this intended purpose would be for that, right? The drone activity.
And if this is included, to include your area, the judicial branch, or the areas that you want to make sure that drones are not in flight. So would you be able, under your own, I guess, budget, be able to put signs up, in places to make sure that, no drones in this area, this vicinity is allowed, something like that? So you guys could be able to afford doing something like that, right?
Yeah, so I think what would follow if this legislation was passed into law, of course, is we would, because the judiciary will be impacted if there's a violation of the law, we would then go back to, of course, our judicial council, our chief justice, and make some recommendations regarding court security and how we would truly enforce this and apply the law to our campus, right, our facilities, both in the Hagåtña campus and, of course, at the Northern Court Satellite, where we also have detainees there. So we definitely would be able to have to move this law into effect, put those measures in place.
Okay, that being said, that actually was going to bring that up to the chief over at DOC, but as well, if you can provide this committee with those guidelines, that would be very helpful as we move forward on the bill, or maybe we can just incorporate into the bill the ability to create your guidelines and rules and regulations in areas and what's required. But if we can get that, ahead of time before we even, when we start the market meeting, this will be very helpful. So we can incorporate it in there. Your ideas would be very helpful.
We'll definitely contribute to that. Senator.
Okay, and I'm sure you'll work with the chair on that,
Yes.
and getting that. Okay, but if you can send it to the committee as well, I appreciate it.
Would do.
Okay, so that being said, Senator Gumataotao?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. No, Danielle, I don't have any other questions, but I'm glad that you mentioned the Northern Court Satellite, because it does have detention facilities there in some of the work that you also do at the Northern Court. But I'm glad you mentioned it on the record, that at least this bill would also include the satellite. That's all I wanted to say, and thank you again for being with us, and thank you again, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senators.
You're very welcome, and thank you. Yeah, you may be excused. And at this time, we're going to continue on with those who've signed up for testimony. And if Chief Badayo, you are now recognized, sir.
Good afternoon, Honorable Senator Telo Taitague and Honorable Senator Shawn Gumataotao. First of all, appreciate and thanks Senator Gumataotao for introducing this legislation. Buenas and Hafide, Honorable Senator Telo Taitague. I'm providing this testimony of support in reference to Bill number 191-38, correction, an act to add a new section 70.460 to Article 4, Chapter 70, Title 9 Guam Code Annotated, relative to prohibiting the unauthorized operation of unmanned aircraft over Guam correctional and detention facilities. The employees of the Department of Corrections appreciate the attention given to a legislative response to asymmetric security threats that evolve with the use of unmanned aircraft that Department of Corrections has experienced. Federal law enforcement officials have communicated to us about the potential trends with this technology and informed us about states enacting laws aligned with federal laws that are countermeasures to deter or mitigate such criminal and even potential terrorist acts with the use of unmanned aircraft. I just want to say that the federal officials I met that came and approached me was the Joint Federal Task Force with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and they had indicated to me that Guam didn't have any legislation, aligned with the federal government and illegal use of restricted airspace for drones. And I actually had an opportunity to visit with the federal officials at the U.S. Attorney's Office because an FAA administrator was there and actually described about some of these asymmetric threats, not only just the potential threats in correctional or prison facilities with contraband, but now when you see the war that's happening in Ukraine with Russia, some of these drones can be weaponized and actually be used to destroy buildings and people inside those buildings. So again, I thank you, Senator Shawn Gumataotao, for this legislation, and I stand ready to answer any questions that you would have, and also Senator Telo that you would have.
Thank you so much. I'm so used to calling you chief, but I know you're the director of DOC, but you'll always be chief to me. Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to recognize Homeland Security. Esther Agagi, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Havade, Senator Gumataotao. Madam Chair, if the court will permit me, may I leave before 3 o'clock? I have a rehearsal for a tabletop exercise regarding the defense of Guam, and I've got people that will be waiting for me.
We'll be sure to ask you questions first, okay, when we come.
Thank you, ma'am. Havade, Madam Chair, and distinguished members of this committee. I am Esther Agagi, the Guam Homeland Security Advisor and Acting Administrator for the Office of Civil Defense. I appear before you today to express strong support for Bill number 191-38. This legislation addresses a real and growing threat. Unmanned aircraft systems, also known as drones, are increasingly being weaponized by criminal networks to breach correctional facility security nationwide. Federal authorities have documented a sharp increase in drone incidents at correctional facilities, with reports showing incidents more than doubling in recent years. And these aren't hypothetical scenarios, they're happening now, and they're escalating. Here on Guam, we've already experienced this threat firsthand. In 2017, a drone crashed near Housing Unit Post 5 at the Department of Corrections. And while that incident appeared accidental, it demonstrated how vulnerable our facilities are to aerial intrusion. As DEPCOR Director Badalio noted in his testimony, federal law enforcement have warned our department about emerging trends and potential terrorist applications of this technology. What's at stake? Drones deliver contraband such as drugs, weapons, cell phones, even tools for escape directly over prison walls and fences. These deliveries fuel violence between inmates, undermine rehabilitation, compromise officer safety, and enable organized criminal operations from inside detention facilities. The threat is evolving faster than our legal framework. Drones are becoming more sophisticated with longer range, heavier payload capacity, and increasingly autonomous. Meanwhile, correctional staff face a patchwork of legal constraints that limit their ability to respond effectively. Federal authorities recognize this urgency. Just last month, the Department of Homeland Security established a new program executive office specifically for counter-drone technologies, backed by a $150 million investment. And in December of 2025, DHS authorities were expanded to include territorial law enforcement partners and correctional agencies in combating drone threats within their jurisdictions. And more information can be found at the website that I included in my testimony. Madam Chair and Senator Gumataotao, Bill 191-38 is a proactive, necessary step. It provides clear statutory authority prohibiting unauthorized drone operations over our correctional facilities. This clarity matters because it strengthens prosecution, deters would-be offenders, and signals that Guam takes the security of its detention facilities seriously. And from a Homeland Security perspective, this bill aligns with our core mission, protecting critical infrastructure and preventing threats before they materialize. Correctional facilities are vulnerable points in our security ecosystem. When their perimeter is compromised, the consequences ripple outward, affecting public safety, law enforcement resources, and community confidence in our justice system. This legislation doesn't restrict legitimate drone use. It protects a specific sensitive airspace where unauthorized flights pose documented security risks. It's a measured response to a documented threat informed by federal guidance and supported by our Department of Corrections operational experience. I urge the committee's favorable consideration of Bill 191-38. Director Badalio and his team at DOC confront these asymmetric security challenges every day. This bill provides them and all of us in public safety with an essential legal tool to protect our facilities, our personnel, and ultimately our community. Siduus Masi, and thank you for your attention to this critical security matter. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Siduus Masi. And at this time, I'd like to also recognize here to testify is Charlie Hermosa. And please state your name for the record and everything under the sky that you do, which is, of course, drone expertise. And
Correct.
you recognize, sir.
My name is Charlie Hermosa. I am the CEO of Bellowings Aviation, and we're a full drone company, as everybody knows. Madam Chair, thank you so much for allowing me the time to present my thoughts about the bill. Senator Shawn Gumataotao, thank you again. I know we were trying to connect and discuss a few issues. I did have a statement prepared. Unfortunately, my computer was used to stream. We had a little issue earlier this morning with streaming the game. So I'm going to have to go on my thought process as far as what I wrote, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. And once again, my background is in the drone technology, UAS, unmanned technology. But most importantly, when we talk about unmanned technology, you have to look at it from the FAA perspective that it's an aircraft. So one of the things that we've been doing across the island is doing outreach programs to not only organizations that are in the federal or on the legal side, law enforcement side, but also the public, that they understand the rules and regulations of safely flying a drone. Our biggest concern is making sure that everybody that has a drone in the air understands that it's actually an aircraft. We've shown videos where drones have actually taken down helicopters, fixed-wing assets. They're dangerous if they don't. So it's one thing crashing into structures, but this could also have a huge detriment when it comes to the airspace. Saying that it's an aircraft, if you bring an aircraft down, whether you throw a rock, whether you shoot it down, or you throw a net, it's a federal offense. And that's one of the things that we're trying to get the public to understand, that you just don't bring down a drone, because under the FAA guidelines, it's an aircraft. You just brought down an aircraft if you bring it down with a slingshot, a firearm, or a net. In the sense of what the bill is trying to put forward, I completely agree that we need laws that would allow the different jurisdictions to control drone flights over certain areas. My biggest concern is that because we're such a small island, and when you look at the 5-mile radius just around the airport, you know, it covers almost a good portion of the island. So for those folks that need to use drones for the real estate market, for recreational activities, they all understand the laws and processes that need to take into account. But they also understand that there's a good portion of the island today that we currently can't fly. You need special authorization by the FAA. Now, when it comes to correctional departments, when it comes to federal buildings, I believe, again, that we need to ensure that we have protection of unwarranted flights over these facilities. But we need to ensure that the legality of putting a placard on a wall that says you can't fly over is not going to stop a drone from flying over. And the director did point out that we have business partners in Ukraine that we work with. I have personally flown out to Turkey and worked with their kinetic and non-kinetic type of technologies that they have. Their non-kinetic technology in Turkey is placed around all major infrastructures, airports, seaports, power, anything related with power, anything related with water. And the non-kinetic technology basically takes control of the drone and creates this 360 shield that doesn't allow, it's called spoofing. So it pretty much takes control of the drone and flies it away without having it to crash. We do have kinetic, which the military has, and that means they zap you right out of the sky and it falls straight down to the ground. That's kinetic. So my intent here is to, one is just ensure that we don't overly put restrictions because we want to be able to control these flights. But at the same time, we should be looking at technology that allows these different facilities to control the airspace in a sense of a kinetic, non-kinetic type environment, sort of a defense type posture. And finally, is today, I would ask you if we can take a really deep dive, because we're discussing putting restrictions, and unfortunately, on the local government side, they don't have any of those technologies. I mean, they're flying the drones right now on the GPD, you know, and that's great, they're getting drones. But for example, we have long-range drones. We have drones that can go 200 plus miles. We have drones that can carry 30, 40 pounds. We fly autonomous. We have one-way drones. We have all this arsenal, right? I mean, we don't do it here on Guam, but we would like to bridge that gap so that we can have this outreach with the jurisdiction so that they understand what is it that they need before we put a law into place. So I would leave it, my remarks on that end, saying that we would like to create the bridge between the private sector and possibly the government, work with the different entities, GPD, GFD, customs, corrections, and go through the programs that are in place that could potentially help them accomplish the mission, which is not to bring in contraband via airspace, whether it's a helicopter, whether it's a drone. That is ultimately what they want, is to make sure that no illegal activities happens above in the airspace. So with that, I'll conclude with my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really don't have a whole lot of questions for Esther. And I know you have to go, but I get you till at least 3 o'clock, right? Okay, so there's not a whole lot. I mean, your testimony was thorough, so it's just a matter of working together. And of course, DOC, Fred, do you know of any laws currently right now that actually has any trespassing penalties or fines, or if you're in the vicinity, or if not trespassing, do you have any penalties and fines or even jail time for anybody who brings in contraband into DOC? Like, let's say, for instance, just cigarettes. We're not talking about the heavy stuff, but just something as simple as a pack of cigarettes. They hid it. They didn't want to, show that they brought it, and they brought it in. What is the penalty and fines for that?
I offhand, I don't know what the fines or penalty is, but they have currently on the law, you have what is defined as major contraband. Cigarettes that are brought in. There's been some recently an inmate caught with a pack of cigarettes, right? And tobacco is not allowed. It's contraband in the Department of Corrections. That would be a misdemeanor. So what we've been doing, and we had the cooperation with Chief Steve Ignacio, the Guam Police Department, because apparently sometimes there was the discussion about, well, that's not major contraband, and we'll provide you an area for the evidence facility they have in Bellow Road to put that confiscated contraband. The point is, I meet with Chief Steve Ignacio. It's a crime. It's a misdemeanor. It should be enforced, right? And I always make copies of the critical incident report where a pack of cigarettes is found as contraband, and we make a copy with the Office of the Attorney General. So they're in the loop also. So someone should be held accountable and prosecuted to the full extent of the law, even if it's a misdemeanor. And because, sometimes also there's a risk that you don't know whether in that pack of cigarettes it's laced with fentanyl or laced with PCP, or in prisons and correctional facilities, it's used for bartering. So they don't sneak in currency or money into the prisons or jails, but that pack of cigarette may have been the payment for one inmate to use a shank and shank another inmate. It could have been, no matter how small it is. You asked the question about trespassing or criminal trespassing, and offhand, to my knowledge, a lot of the crimes start with unlawful entry, and then from unlawful entry to criminal trespassing, then burglary. That's how it goes. Now, individuals who, and I think I had this discussion one time with the Civil Service Commission about our Parole Services Division. When you go to the Ganya, the former Central Precinct there's a sign there that says you can't enter in here. You have to press like the buzz, the button there, to let the parole officer come and open the door. Should that person not have buzzed the door and broken through, that's burglary. If the door was open, but they went in and they went into the offices and roamed around where our parole officers, they carried their firearms and they're in an area and where it's restricted, that's an unlawful entry also, and the same thing too is anyone coming into the Department of Corrections, we have signs about promotion of prison contraband up there, but we have our locked gates and everything, and we'll have signs that say restricted entry, and this is law enforcement sensitive facility. If we charge them for unlawful entry, we'll also charge them for obstructing government operations because they're certainly disrupting the lawful law enforcement operations of our facility.
Yeah, in fact, there's really nothing in the law when it comes to trespassing. And when you think of these drones, it doesn't have to be a human body anymore. It could be a robot. And now we're seeing drones entering and trespassing into airspace or land above that. So I'm looking into that right now. In fact, legislation to to define trespassing and what are the fines with that. And, you mentioned earlier, Charlie, that of course, thank you so much for taking my call and coming down here, because when it comes to drones, I know you're the person that can shed some light on it. And I do have a question with regards to what you mentioned earlier, and this might be very helpful for corrections if they're given that ability to take down drones. Now, you said in your statement, I don't know how you're shooting out of the sky, you're able to take. So how does that actually work? If you see a drone in the area, is there a certain kind of,
Device.
Ray gun or
Right.
something that can disable the electricity in the thing to take it down?
Yeah, I mean, you're going on the right path,
Okay.
Senator. So basically, the non-kinetic, there's different ways. There's radar systems that can actually spoof the drones. And basically what that means is we, on the opposite side, we would actually have a command center that once we detect a drone come in on the radar, we would actually take command of it. Whoever's flying it on the other side would lose control of it. So that way we can safely land it. It's not just drops off, on top of somebody's house or, close to the park. We can take control of it, we land it, and then we investigate.
Okay.
And that's the non-kinetic. The kinetic is, there's several different ways now. There's actually, somewhat of something that looks like a firearm, actually, but it's actually a laser system that actually disarms the drone. You have a net shooting system. I mean, there's multiple ways to be able to take down the drone kinetically, but I feel that the non-kinetic environment is probably safer for us because we're so close on the island with different buildings around the facilities, that would allow us to be able to manage an incoming drone or drones, a swarm drone. That's the other part, right? I mean, everybody sees the drone light shows that we do. We send up 100+ drones in the air and we control it with one computer. You can just imagine if we wanted to do some serious damage, if we want to send all those drones to a specific site,
So not using that ray gun,
Yeah.
it's called, what's it called, kinetic?
It's a kinetic, right?
Kinetic? And how much does something like that cost?
So it's just like a computer. The price of it is coming down significantly because there's other vendors. Before the race was to get all the drones up in the air. Now the race is to get them down. So I would say that the price range probably is between 30 to 80,000 per system, depending on the systems that you would need. If it's a radar, for example, the radar system that we looked in Turkey, that was ranging closer to the 200,000, but that was a mobile radar. It was very sophisticated. It can go to the
Covered
airport.
more ground space too.
Yeah, right,
versus
correct.
DOC, if they needed something, that 80 grand one would be a
Right.
lot more conducive. Yeah.
And somebody would have to alert them, right? So
yeah.
somebody would have to say, I think we see a drone in the air, and then they would have to deploy the folks that are in charge of doing that. So a little different.
And then that kinetics can actually read drones that are coming in at a low level. I mean, first, Chief, how tall are the fences over at DOC?
Those fences are about 20 feet high.
20 feet high.
Yeah.
So drones would have to at least go up to that height, and they can be detected. But once they get into above the fence, they can drop to a lower range, and they still kinetically can be seen. Okay, read and seen. And that makes it a lot easier to be able to enforce this legislation, because then you can actually kind of pinpoint who's operating it, where it's coming from, and do your investigation to actually find the perpetrator, to be able to put these fines, or whether it's jail time, a misdemeanor, or like that.
And that's probably one of the most important, the most critical thing is being able to investigate and see who's flying it. But unfortunately, what I will tell you is that, for example, I can have a drone right now in a island nation like Palau and FSM, and I can launch it from here remotely.
Wow.
So yeah, so the technology has been really, really, it's advanced. So that's why I just want to make sure that the law goes in hand with the technology that I feel needs to be put in place in order to prevent these incidents from happening. Because I would say that right now, corrections doesn't have, other than the ears that they have, to be able to say there's an inbound drone coming in. I don't know, Director, if you do have the capability to recognize.
No, we don't. At the most, we just have observations from
So
our
it's about
officers on the
manning.
ground.
Yeah, it's about manning DOC with what they need, as well
Correct.
as judiciary. Asking us to do
Correct.
the same thing at judiciary. So that being said, then. It is going faster. I mean, like you said, now they're actually underwater drones. We're not just talking about sky, but underwater. So they're really coming out as fast as, the next day, a new type of mechanism or robot that's going to be able to infiltrate. Pretty soon it's going to be something new that we won't know how to deal with if we don't get on top of this one right now. And this legislation is a good start. So I'm looking in as far as laws that would actually, have real substance, to not just a $500 fine. Anybody who has a drone or is doing something like that, I'm pretty sure $500 is a drop in the bucket.
Senator, I just wanted to mention, that because when I used to be in narcotics, just to get permission to get a judge's order to sign to surveillance, because drones were normally traditionally before used for surveillance, right? So, but I would need an order from a judge. There's always an expectation to privacy on what we're attempting to conduct a surveillance, especially for narcotics operations. And then, of course, on the context of what you said, trespassing, a drone being used to come in, not to drop contraband, not to be weaponized, but just to spy and look at and go into an area where people are undressed, the inmates are undressed, or the privacy of individuals, right, in homes. If they come into a neighborhood and they're hovering around our home while, we feel we have an expectation of privacy, there could be some criminal or civil liabilities to that.
Absolutely. And my last thing is that, because of this drone situation, and actually I've been doing some studying on drones, which I'm happy to share with you. I have a conference coming up on that, cybersecurity as well as drones, that is going to happen in Hawaii, that I'm looking forward to attending that. And no media is involved. Not involved, allowed in. This is kind of, I definitely got to go to that one and see what they're saying. But I found out, my staff, we did a little, investigating ourselves. We actually went online and found an app that actually gives you a permit to fly the drones. It's as simple as that. You go on, you get that app, you sign up, and it shows you the no-fly zones, which is very minimal on Guam, very, very minimal. And then you say that, okay, this is the area that I would like to fly over it. So we went ahead and decided to do Manilao area. And we actually, so you press, send and put all that. We actually got a permit online to fly the drone over DOC with no problem. Isn't that ironic? So this is something we definitely have to address on a federal level. Like you said, you were talking with FCC, that was, the FAA, I mean. FAA was there, and we got to talk to them about that. Hey, we need to get these apps that you're putting out there and comply with the Guam law and saying, okay, no, there is a strict no-fly zone over DOC. There's a strict no-fly zone over judicial. But currently, right now, we got a permit. We found out some areas in Naval Station, we can get permits and fly over Naval Station. That's military.
I mean, yes and no. So we have authorization to fly over the airport, but that's going through a process, authorization process through the FAA. We could easily put NOTAMs where it would depict areas for short-term periods. For example, when the president ever comes to town, there's a lot of restrictions put on the airspace up north, and everybody understands that you log into that app and you see where you can and cannot fly. But it still doesn't prohibit you. Like it does not stop you from flying. It just alerts you to the fact that if you do fly, you're violating a law. So it doesn't physically stop you from doing anything. So you can get the permit, but you can still fly. So that's where we just want to make sure that the law is kind of in hand with the mission of what the corrections is trying to accomplish.
Absolutely, and that means that we need to get a hold of the FAA, and we need to, especially that app that's going on. That was amazing. So I was very shocked to see that happen. Yeah. But other than that, I have no more questions to ask. I'm going to turn it over to the author who can ask a question, as well as do your closing as well. So Senator Gumataotao, you are now recognized.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And let me just ask this of Esther before she has to go. So I'll ask you first a question, but we'll excuse you, and then I can ask the other questions for the other parts of the panel, if that's okay. Recognizing that a reference to drones in Guam law, specifically 12 GCA section 58104S1, defines commercial drones as unmanned aerial vehicles or unmanned aircraft systems which can be flown remotely controlled or fly autonomously through software-controlled flight plans in their embedded systems, working in conjunction with onboard sensors and GPS. Is it necessary, from a Homeland Security point of view, is it necessary to adjust the definition in either Bill 191 or current law for consistency purposes?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. We're definitely going to lean on your guidance for that, of course, with the subject matter experts at the table to determine what would be the best for the people of Guam. But the fact that there is a law in place just speaks volumes about how we need to pay very close attention to this new development of technology. I realize that, we've entered a new frontier of air dominance and air superiority. And with drones, it brings that to a whole new level. So it's difficult to keep up with technology and with the times. So Senator, we'll definitely work with this committee and whatever else we need to do to ensure that the people of Guam are certainly safe with the use of drones.
All right, thank you, Esther. And that was my only question, Madam Chair, for Esther. So if you want to excuse her, it'd be okay.
Thank you so much, Esther. And we will be in touch, especially when we do any kind of changes to the bill that we can take it to you to look at before we send it to the Committee on Rules. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir.
Okay.
Thank you for the privilege.
Thank you again. My next question, I'll just repeat the question for the panel, and this is probably for Charlie. Again, recognizing that a reference to drones in Guam law, specifically 12 GCA, Section 58104S1 defines commercial drones as unmanned aerial vehicles, UAV, or unmanned aircraft systems, UAS, which can be flown remotely controlled or fly autonomously through software-controlled flight plans in their embedded systems, working in conjunction with onboard sensors and GPS. Is it necessary to adjust the definition in either Bill 191 or the current law for consistency purposes?
At this point, no.
Okay, for the benefit of policymakers and those who are following today's discussion on Bill 191, was the Department of Corrections able, you might have to just think about this one for a second, Chief, was DOC able to determine the owner and operator of the drone that was found near Post 5 at the Manila facility in the year 2017, and what information is available to confirm whether the device was used for criminal purposes? So either from your former role at GPD or a maybe historical reference at DOC.
Yes, I wasn't the chief of police in 2017, but I just make the assumption that if they got that as a police report and the Guam police has that investigation, that they would collaborate with federal authorities to try and get the identification of that drone that they caught in Post 5.
And so what policies have been implemented internally at DOC in response perhaps to the 2017 incident, and have there been any additional cases involving unauthorized drones at DOC's Manilao or Hagåtña facilities in your time as the DOC director?
Since my time at DOC in 2023 in August, we've had one where there was a drone found on the perimeter area. This was maybe about 2024. We got it, obtained a Guam Police Department case number for it, and the Guam Police Department has that investigation, and it's sort of within the same time frame where federal officials have met with me and encouraged us talk to your lawmakers and see whether you could get legislation in place for the use of drones and that technology, which you've certainly done, Senator. Appreciate that.
All right, thank you so much. And maybe one of the two of you might be able to respond to this, but recognizing that a Guam resident was sentenced on September 11, 2025 in the U.S. District Court of Guam to 2 months home confinement for a violation of national defense airspace, what collaboration, if any, has either DOC or the private sector engaged in with federal law enforcement to help investigate any reported sensitive footage of either DOC facilities or other critical infrastructure that may have been published on different media platforms without DOC's or the infrastructure property owners' knowledge or approval?
So one of the things that we do is we actually have a very big UAS group on island. We have a lot more citizens who have an actual FAA license that are authorized to fly commercially, which is a very important thing. And within that group, we will notice, and we take it upon ourselves to ensure that if we look at any pictures, any videos, and we see that there's some illegal actions being performed, we'll go out to the group and ask, do you know anybody who's doing this? Because as a group, we want to make sure, number one, is that everybody's flying safe, and number two, that the public understands and they're not afraid of seeing drones in the sky, because we use them for our business. We use them to take pictures for marketing. We use them for real estate. We use them for construction. So we want to be able to ensure that we collaborate with the community to ensure that the drones that you see in the air are safe. GPA has a drone program now, and you've seen the notices that they put out saying, hey, listen, by the way, we're going to be in Señahaña this weekend. There's going to be drones in the air. And those are the type of outreach that we need to continue to do. So we go out and we personally go out and do our own little detective work on ensuring that we identify who's posting these pictures and videos, and we will try to reach out to them and ensure to either you're in violation, you need to stop, or, you know, in certain cases, they've come back and said, you know what, had no idea. You know, obviously, we'll take it for what it's worth, you know, on them not knowing. And so that, you know, ignorance to the FAA is not an excuse.
Right,
They will tell you right off the bat, number one, you know, some of the laws are very vague, but they want you to understand and make the best possible decision. And so from a safety requirement, if you do something unsafe, that's on you. And number two, if you violate one of the laws, it's on you as well. So you not knowing that you could not fly over, you know, Camp Blas is no excuse, is not, you know, being ignorant.
Got you. Chief.
When I established the Strategic Threat Intelligence Unit for the Department of Corrections, we share, and I shared this when I was at that meeting with that FAA who came over and a number of federal officials that were there, that any sort of critical incident that we have, crimes that are taking place at Department of Corrections, including that drone that had that was found in our perimeter, that we share that information with the Marianas Regional Fusion Center, and we also share it with the Office of the Attorney General of Guam. I'm assuming because we send those, you know, my STIU intelligence are sharing with the Office of the Attorney General, that they collaborate with the U.S. Attorney. So there's coordination for any kind of prosecution that could take place either at the federal level or the local level. With this law, Senator, that you're introducing gets passed, I'm sure that same collaboration is going to take place with the local Guam Attorney General's office and the federal U.S. Attorney that see this technology as a threat in terms of the security that can be compromised when they go over our facilities.
All right, thank you,
So,
sir.
and may I also add, so one of the laws that went into place, federal laws that went into play last year as well, is the remote ID, remote identification. So basically, before, you know, if the federal government wanted to find out who was flying it, there was a little bit of investigating. But now, every drone over a certain weight needs to have a remote ID. And basically, that is almost like your license plate. So, and in order for you to fly, you know, in any airspace, you need to have that remote ID. If you do not have a license plate, per se, on these drones now, you're in violation of the new law that was finally implemented last year. And so if it's a drone that already has this remote ID, you're good to go. If it's what they call outside the market remote ID that you place on the drone to be in you know, not violating the law, there's only certain areas and certain specifications on how you can fly that drone. So the remote ID, the FAA does have a way to be able for you to identify who's flying it, because if you can identify the remote ID, they can look it up into their site and say, oh, this is Senator Shawn Gumataotao. It says right here his address, his phone number, and everything else. So it's, you know, so there is a way to be able to identify, but again, these, you know, the folks that are violating the law may not be following the law and may not have a remote ID.
And that's a great point, because as a person who is probably more afraid of violating the law, I spent more time investing into the economy to those drone operators who are actually following the law, or you anticipate that they are, so that when you do either pay for a service to take video or footage over facilities, I've spent my share of money to do that in my small business prior to coming here, more fearful of the violation of federal law, especially in and around the airport or any of our defense Department of War facilities. But again, I thank you, because I think much of what even the chair had mentioned, we have people who are trying to you know, use drones correctly, but as the chief has experienced, there are folks who are bad actors. And this law is to prevent, because right now the bad guy is not going to go down to the FAA and say, give me a permit. They're going to try to find every way to circumvent the law. And again, this is in an attempt to try to encourage that no activities over our DOC or others will be had.
Right, and unfortunately the law doesn't, doesn't prohibit these drones from actually physically taking off, right? It's just the means to be able to have some control. And the other aspect is, you're right, you know, these bad actors nowadays, you know, they're using drones to scope out, you know, backyards. it's unbelievable. And I mean, that's what we sort of have to target, but we have to be able to balance out the law with, putting all these major restrictions on, the drone industry, right? For us to be able to ensure that we don't get so constrained on being able to fly the way we're doing today.
All right, thank you so much, Charlie. That was my final question, ma'am. Do you want me to go to my close, or should you have anything else? All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to the panel for being with us. And again, I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for conducting this public hearing on Bill 191. And my challenge to our colleagues, obviously, we have ourselves here, but others that are not in attendance or are not a member of the Committee on Justice, I would ask that my colleagues to provide your input in the coming days as outlined in our rules back to this committee. I would ask them to send an email to Senator Telo @gmail.com with your input and recommended changes to make Bill 191 better, as many of my colleagues have made it a point to say on the floor in recent sessions and with other policies that we have addressed here since the start of our term in the 38th Guam Legislature. I ask my colleagues to please help make the bill better at this point in the process. While, again, fellow colleagues, you might have a right to change this policy on the floor across the hall, I urge diligence and respect for our process that started here in this body in 1951. For the record, ideas to change any part of this particular bill works in our process in the Guam Legislature. Again, colleagues, your thoughts that you are against this bill is important too. Thank you in advance for your support of the markup process of Bill 191. And once again, that is our job, and that's what we are elected to do here in the Guam Legislature. Madam Chair, if approved, Bill 191 makes clear that unauthorized drone activity in and above our correctional and detention facilities threatens public safety. It aids the movement of illegal contraband into these facilities, and it places an additional and unnecessary burden on the department's limited number of personnel who do their very best to mitigate threats at a time when DOC's population continues to increase and as its facilities deteriorate faster than leadership is able to get repairs done and the development of a new prison facility to be built. Correctional staff are tasked with identifying and responding to drones. Well, they must overcome technology that is quickly gaining enhanced abilities to deliver contraband and avoid detection. Advances in drone technology have made detection and mitigation more and more challenging with each passing day. To reduce contraband that enters by drone, a facility must be able to detect the drone and counter it by legal methods. That is what Bill 191 does. Direct physical interaction, that is control, capture, or destruction with the drone, presents specific legal risks to the public safety agencies, specifically the Department of Corrections and the men and women that may be incarcerated there, as well as we heard today, our friends at the our sister branch of the Judiciary of Guam across their 2 facilities that have detention facilities. For these reasons, Madam Chair, I believe that Bill 191 will help us take a small but very important step forward in our collective efforts to ensure the safety of our DOC employees and those who are under their watch and care. Madam Chair, I appreciate the opportunity in advance to work with your Committee on Justice during the markup stage as we move Bill 191 through the legislative process. And again, I thank you. I thank my colleagues and stakeholders that were here today for your attendance and participation in today's public hearing. Thank you again.
You're very welcome, Senator Gumataotao. And for the, I invite every single senator. I don't just limit it to my committee members. Whenever I have a markup meeting, an invitation is sent to every single senator to come and participate. And I welcome them with open arms because, like Senator Gumataotao said, that, we try and get this bill as clean as possible. And I'd like to think that the reflection of no other senator here is because they know when the bill comes to my committee, I do my due diligence. I know that the Attorney General is not here, and I really would like him to chime in on any comments that he has or recommendations, which I will continue to reach out to him until I get some kind of testimony moving forward because it's very important. So we will definitely do our due diligence. I like the comment that you made, Charlie. Ignorance is not an excuse. Absolutely right. That's why it's so important for outreach programs. It's so important that even us as a legislature to ensure that information on when public hearings are coming about or when the law has been changed, that the public takes note of this. And we do that through outreach and finding the best way to reach the public to notify them. So there is no excuse, like you said earlier. So that being said, I want to first thank you, gentlemen, for being here today to testify. And if there's no further questions, that Bill 191-38 COR has been duly heard. Now, my office will continue to receive written testimony on today's hearing, which can be mailed to my office at 238 Archbishop Flores Street, Suite 407 of the DNA building in Hagåtña. You can also send your testimony to my office. Charlie, I know that if you can find it in that streaming situation, I'd love to get your written testimony for the record. And you can send that to Senator Telo @gmail.com. So thank you again for your participation and create a great day. This bill has been heard. The time now is 3:07 p.m. Si Diyos masi.